Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and here we are with another series. This time it's focused on Warhammer the Old World. So for those that aren't aware, Warhammer the Old World is a return to the original lore and world of Warhammer Fantasy Battle before Age of Sigmar, and with it brings essentially a new game for the tabletop, but is a return to the style of Warhammer Fantasy Battle with rank and file. Now, this has been announced as being in creation right now with Games Workshop. There is currently no release date, but it certainly is expected either by the end of 2023 or the first half of 2024. So in reality, not that far away. Now, in terms of what this series is looking at, it's looking at those models that are currently available to buy that could well be expected to be part of the army books and army lists that will be used in Warhammer the Old World. Now, we do know there are new models coming, and we'll look at that when we come on to each of the factions. We'll be looking at the factions in alphabetical order, starting with those that are currently in the narrative, and then looking at those that are outside of the narrative, though we do know there are at least rules coming for every faction when the game is first released. Now, why am I doing this? Well, for people like me who are old Warhammer Fantasy Battle players that probably still have existing armies, maybe gathering dust somewhere, who haven't been keeping up to date with what's available on the web store, it's a look at what you could still buy to flesh out the armies that you already own. If you're new to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, then it's a look at, if you were going to start an army, what an army might look like, what the models might look like, and give you a chance to maybe dip in early. If you're like me, I'm a very slow painter, so this gives me a chance to buy models in advance of the game being released and have them painted and ready to play when the game does fully release. And as well, not many people are sat there with, £300, £400, £500. We don't know how big the armies are going to be to drop on an army on day one. So this does allow you to then spread the costs over buying the units over many, many months. And sort of you can buy a unit, paint it up, and next month buy a unit, and you're not having to find the money all in one go. Now, I should say everything that is in this series are personal opinions only. I have no inside knowledge. I have no relationship with Games Workshop in that way, other than being a fan of Warhammer Fantasy Battle and the lore of that game, and everything in the series is correct at the time of recording only, and I have based a lot of what I'm going to talk about on the last remaining army book that was published for the factions. Many of those will be 8th edition, but there are a few like Chaos Dwarfs and Bretonnia that didn't have 8th edition army books. Now, before we get into it, other miniatures are available. You can find, obviously, the old classic miniatures that are no longer available to buy from Games Workshop on eBay, for example. You've got other manufacturers that you can use as counts as, such as DS Vault with their sort of Crusaders and Templars and so on, Kings of War. There's also those 3D printer opportunities out there, whether you own a 3D printer and you're looking for the files, or whether you're looking for someone to do it for you. That's an option, but always remember that non-official Games Workshop models are not usually allowed to be used in their stores, at gaming tables, or in the tournaments. Also, when you're looking at the Games Workshop models on their website, check the bases. Some of these will have round bases, some of them will have square. Now, we know that they're going to be square bases, but we also know there's going to be some base size changes, so please keep that in mind when you're buying the models. And again, if a lot of times the bases you don't really care if you're just playing at home or playing in a local club, but if you are playing in tournament, you will need obviously the correct base sizes. But if you're not too fussed about making sure they're fully correct, then you've obviously, consider the fact that when you're playing a rank and file game like Warhammer Fantasy Battle was, and like the old world will be, movement trays will be a really important part. So you can mitigate a lot of the base issues with movement trays. Also, check the material. Some people really don't like Finecast, so there's still quite a lot of the old models that are dotted around that may well be Finecast, so check that out versus plastic. And if you are looking at stuff off eBay or whatever, and it's Forge World, that of course will be resin, so for example the Chaos Dwarves. And overall, given what we know about Warhammer the Old World, the timeline it's going to be set in, I would avoid buying named characters unless there's a nostalgia thing. There will surely be rules, even if Games Workshop doesn't do it. The fan base will provide rules for some of those characters that you might have played in the past. You can consider the timeline and maybe take a gamble on, if you look at some of the longer lived characters, whether they be demons or whatever, even elves, for example. Maybe those characters will make an appearance. But with a new game, with a new timeline, I can certainly expect that we might see a few new named characters put in. Though, of course, as always, you can use these named characters as accounts as. So if you had Karl Franz, the Emperor of the Empire, for example, on his Griffin, there's no reason you couldn't use him as a general on Griffin if that option was available. So that is essentially the intro of why we're doing it and some of the considerations that you need to consider while we go through each of these videos. But without further ado, let's go and look at the next faction. So the next faction up is one that blows my mind, and it's the Skaven. It has to be one of the most popular factions I've come across, certainly around my gaming groups, online and so on. People love the Skaven, but it also seems to be one of the most neglected factions in terms of miniatures, both back in Warhammer Fantasy Battle and now in Age of Sigmar. So, I'm hoping at some point there's going to be this huge re-release and redo of the Skaven army, but we're not there yet. Skaven also for Warhammer the Old World is on the outside of the rules, so there'll be an initial release, but no follow-up after at this time. Who knows what the future may hold. But looking at the last army book they had available in Warhammer Fantasy Battle and the last viable army list, we can see they had a whole ton of special lords. There was Thankful and Bone Ripper, and you can see that model in the centre bottom there at £55. There was Screech Vermin King, who is a named Vermin Lord, at £70. Queek Headtaker, however, Nurglitch, Throt the Unclean, and Deathmaster Snitch no longer available. And certainly Queek, Throt, and Deathmaster Snitch were in Finecast, so it will be interesting to see if those kits ever make their way back. I'm not sure how much the Finecast will. You've got Lord Skrulk there, known as Plague Priest. He's currently £12. He's on the left-hand side. And then you've got Ikit Claw, who's currently known as the Arch Warlock. He's £16. He's on the bottom left of the screen. As always, with the named characters, will they be in the list of rules or will they not? Difficult to say. I think the interesting thing overall with Warhammer is if you look at Warhammer Fantasy Battle, there were named characters that were dead, but they were in the story, and people wanted a miniature, so there it was, and they didn't worry about that timeline too much. But I think it'll be interesting the way they're doing it this time, with the fact they're quite stuck with this timeline and they're focused on what's in and what's out of that timeline. Will the characters be there or not? I think it's quite a risk that they won't. So please keep that in mind. Lords, though, Grey Seer is available. However, he is part of the Screaming Bell kit at £45. That's in the bottom middle there. A Warlord is available. He's known as a Claw Lord, however, £17, and he's on the bottom left. Plague Lord is not available, nor is the Eshin Sorcerer Lord or Master Mutator. You can pick up a Warlock Master, known as the Arch Warlock. We saw that before as Ikit Claw for £16. You've got a Master Assassin, which is known as the Deathmaster, relatively new model, £22.50, and that is on the upper left side. And the other thing you've got is a Vermin Lord, and if you go to the bottom left, you can see the Vermin Lord. Now, you can make him different versions of the Vermin Lord, so you've got the named one we talked about, Screech Vermin King. The one that you see there is a Deceiver, which is the Eshin one, but there's also one that has a sort of, a Skyer focus, one that has Clan Verminous focus, and so on. So, there are different versions of the Vermin Lord to fit the clan that maybe you're leaning towards the most. Pretty nice kit. I really do like the Eshin one, which is why I've used a picture for that, but there are other versions of it available, all at £70. You'd like to think the Vermin Lord will make it in the list, it being available, being a relatively new plastic kit, and well liked as far as I'm aware by the community. In terms of special heroes, Tretch Cravendale and Squeal Gnawtooth not currently available. And also in terms of the generic heroes, Chieftain and Eshin Sorcerer not. However, Plague Priest is. We saw that as the Skrulk model at £12. You can use the Death Master we saw before as well as a generic assassin. You've got a Master Molder there at £13. That is the centre bottom model. Warlock Engineer, you get 2 for £19. Those are the ones on the left. The Screaming Bell we saw on the previous page, and you've also got the Plague Furnace, which shares a kit with the Screaming Bell at £45, and you see that in the top centre. Relatively iconic units there. You could expect most of these to make it in the list going forward, in terms of those rules that are released. And again, Skaven not doing too bad, though it should be remembered that a number of these models are very, very old. And also here, core units, I mean, again, doing absolutely very good in terms of availability, the fact the units are there, but some of these models are very old. Clan Rats, 20 for £27.50. Now, Skaven Slaves aren't available as a separate thing. However, there's no reason why you couldn't, either with a tiny bit of converting or even a different paint job, you could make Clan Rats also Skaven Slaves. So that's something to consider if you were going down that route. Storm Vermin available, 20 for £37.50. So pretty good value in terms of the basic infantry. But when you get to the weapon teams, Warp Grinder and Rattling Gun there at £13. You see the Rattling Gun bottom left, and then a Warp Fire Thrower £16 bottom right. Now that is for a single weapon team. Plague Monks are on the left centre picture there at 20 for £27.50. Night Runners, a very old kit as well, 20 for £25. If you want Giant Rats, unfortunately they're part of the Rat Ogre kit, and there are 6 Giant Rats in there for £27.50, and then Rat Swarms you get 2 for £16. But it is where you are starting to look at some quite old sculpts, like those Night Runners. They do look a little bit old, and you've got to really want them, I think, to pick them up. And I have to say, things like the Plague Monks aren't that bad. Storm Vermin are actually quite nice, but the weapon teams as well are particularly old kits, and yeah, again, you've got to potentially really want to pick them up, and they could get quite expensive if you're buying multiple. In terms of special units, Gutter Runners, another old kit, you get 3 for £13. So if you're going to build a unit, that's going to be really expensive. Plague Sensor Bearers as well, 5 for £27.50. So Gutter Runners are on the far left, Plague Sensors are on the far right of those pictures. Plague Rats and Wolf Rats not currently available. Rat Ogres, you get 2 for £27.50, and as said before, that does include 6 Giant Rats. Warplock Jezzails, 3 for £37.50, again, very pricey. And Poison Wind Globadiers, that is 1 for £13. So imagine trying to build a unit of 10 or 20. Ferociously expensive for very old kits. And that's why I say, with Skaven, it blows my mind the fact that there is so much that could be done with these models, with the aesthetic, and it just hasn't been, and I'm surprised given how popular the faction is. It's a real shame and a real surprise. I can only hope that with Age of Sigmar we see some of these kits be redone that you can then take back into your old world army. So just, I think if you're going down the Skaven path, you might want to think up front about what you want, because it could get very expensive very quickly. In terms of rare units, the Eshin Triad and Brood Horror not currently available, but the Hell Pit Abomination is, and that's not a bad pickup at £42.50. Man, I have still nightmares about how tough those things are to kill, and then when they come back alive. Storm Fiends, which are a much newer plastic kit and in sort of same aesthetic as the Thankwall on Bone Ripper model. You get 3 for £45, sort of a very Skyer type unit. Plague Core Catapult there, which is a shared kit with the Warp Lightning Cannon at £25, and a Doom Wheel as well for £25. So the rare units are actually not in bad shape. It's those special units in particular that will get expensive and are quite old, as well as the core units. So Skaven, there's plenty of units to buy, but I think in terms of all the ones we've covered that are on the outside that aren't getting new units as part of the old world, have some of the oldest units and will be the most expensive to put an army together. So that's just something to really consider with Skaven, and just hope in the meantime that there'll be an Age of Sigmar release that will redo some of the units that we can bring back into our old world army. And that's it for the Skaven. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was useful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. But if not, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more content, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do. It means a lot for me. So thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you very soon.